Welcome to Mindful Minutes. I'm Michelle Needens. I'm one of the social workers here at the KU Alzheimer's Disease Center, the Cognitive Care Network. We're going to talk today about cognitive changes in the workplace and the implications both for the person with the disease as well as for you as a care partner. So in terms of the person with the disease, there certainly are individuals that have been diagnosed with early stage, whatever, mild cognitive impairment, early Alzheimer's, early vascular dementia that can continue in the workplace for a time. And really the length of that time varies on a whole bunch of things. It varies based on the type of job. It varies on how routinized the job is, the tenure of the job, how long they've been doing it. It really really implicates as well what the culture of the job is, the nature of the schedule. So all of those things factor in as we think of how long can someone stay in the workplace. So as it relates to type of job, there are some that are higher risk that probably will translate in having to either change jobs, change responsibilities, or retire earlier than others. One of those can be if the job relates to numbers. So people that are accountants, people that are, financial managers, those kind of things. If most of their job is numbers or a big part of their jobs or high responsibility with numbers, chances are that you need to be prepared and they need to be prepared that likely changes will have to occur earlier rather than later. High-paced jobs can be a challenge if you're in a environment that just requires, multitasking and moving and doing and managing 4 fires at the same time. That's going to be problematic. It doesn't mean necessarily exiting, but it certainly means exploring accommodations. And if accommodations can't be made, it might mean exiting earlier rather than later. It doesn't mean this moment. I'm just saying these are kinds of jobs that we need to wrap our minds around, probably will have more significant job implications. New technology, people that are in jobs where they change their software, change reporting, those new computer systems may present a complicated barrier for someone with a dementia or with cognitive changes. Procedural memory can impact. That doesn't mean exiting a job, but it might mean a different set of accommodations. We're going to talk about that. So step by step, people can lose where they are in things. They can know how to do work fill out certain things on a computer and not remember exactly how to get to something on the computer. Performance anxiety absolutely can impact. So the people who just even go into work, anxiety rises and they have that on guard feeling all the time in work. Maybe repeating their work, all those kinds of things that tell you that they're feeling uncertain and on sandy soil in their job, that can have an impact. And then, really understanding the role and significance of the job to you as a family. Sometimes we put in extra effort to keep people in their jobs because of the financial implications, for example, or because of the identity issues. So it just depends. For some people, this gives a good reason to retire, something they wish they could have done earlier. So it really understanding what the role and the significance of the job both is to the person with the disease as well as to yourself. So what could be job accommodations for memory changes? And most of this list, as you note, relates to external cues. So whether that's a voice activated recorder to record verbal instructions of how to do something, or written information, Sometimes we'll advise what I call an independence book, which is, one page, one set of instructions for a task, and it's all categorized and alphabetized, or whatever organizational system makes it easier for the person. So if they need, for example, going to a Word file to make a PowerPoint, that there's step-by-step instructions, or how to manage a certain report on Excel, that there's written instructions with maybe even pictures to step-by-step that they can refer to. And oftentimes that doesn't even relate to them knowing how to do it as much as having the confidence and reducing the anxiety when they have that external cue to refer to. Use of checklists to manage schedule. So, if someone is, a stalker in the hardware store, or whatever, a checklist of where to get materials and the aisles and where to put certain things, etc. Templates or forms, if they're in a job that requires filling out a form, that maybe there's an example in the independence book that shows them how to fill out that form, or reminds them, or a template. Here's what you can say for this. The email needs to have these 3 parts, or whatever. Anything that might be regular in their job that it could help them if they had an example. And again, it's not just can they do it, maybe they can do it, but the anxiety is attached. So one, to help them do it, but the second thing, equally if not more important, is to manage the anxiety and the lack of confidence. And then just focusing on essential functions. There's so many people in the world that are what I call overfunctioners. I mean, we all have a tendency to take on more than we need to. And maybe it's because we see our coworkers struggle and we want to help them. Maybe it's because we get a lot of external affirmation for doing that, and that's something important to us. Or maybe it's because there's nobody there to do it. There's a gap in the workplace and you're just filling a gap trying to help. So for whatever reason it is, maybe it's just you're a person that just always goes the extra mile, or the person living with the disease. And in this case, we need to really focus on essential functions. Am I doing what I need to do, rather than taking on extra? And you heard me say that applies for the person with the disease as well as you as caregiver. If you are working and you're that kind of a person, you've got a lot on your plate at home, and managing this new role as a support of the person with the disease, and maybe really doing well with the essential functions is where you need to be too. Using color coding systems to indicate important information. So whether that be making your checklist the things in red, or the things that I've got to get done, or there's a to-do file that's in red that you put some of the things to do in that red file, but to somehow trigger not just with words, but also with visual cues that might support that prioritization in some way. And then asking for extended or individual time when workplace changes occur. And, on Zoom, it could be requesting a recorded, the meeting recorded so you can listen to it again and again, the person can. Maybe it's even that you can listen at it with the person so you can write down pertinent notes and help translate into their work environment. So let's say a few more, have a little bit more conversation about the organizational accommodations. That's really important. Many of us, if we go in our offices and we have stacks, or a file, a pile that we may or may not ever get to, or that we're working on things and we just lay them around the desk and things can get miscombobulated. So maybe it worked for that person for years and years, but maybe it doesn't. And there's lots of people working from home now. And that adds a certain complexity. So if there's a space they work in at home, it needs to be a designated place. And we need to minimize all clutter in that work area, both when they're not working and when they're working. And so maybe that means you as care partner even going in on an off hour time to help them organize their office. Maybe that means getting a friend or somebody close to them to help organize the office. But the clutter needs to be completely minimized. What's left in the office are those things that are usable, that are needable, that are clear. Again, color coding items or resources. So whether the files are color coded for certain things, or you use the sticky tags to identify certain tasks or certain things that need to be paid attention to by day of the week, for example, just depending on your job. But again, we're trying to raise the bar on visual cues to support the person in doing well. Large tasks need to be divided into multiple smaller tasks. So, if a report is needed to be done, it should be identified by section and what needs to go in those sections, and just take one section at a time. So any task, whatever to file everything, it needs to be one little stack at a time, so that there's a sense of moving towards some completion and not getting overwhelmed. We don't want to change everything in the workplace. We don't want to get, for example, a new desk that has different parts to it. Let's try to make the familiar work. We just want to do it in a new organizational system. Labeling the drawers and the files. And if they're in a workplace that, that they're in a stock room or, working in aisles or something like that, then really paying attention to a labeling system there might be useful, and the environment might be willing for that to happen. It might help other people. And then connecting symbols with words, sometimes instead of words, especially when it's about technology, really showing step by step what needs to take place. It can be a layout of a grocery store if that's where they work. It just really depends on where the kind of work environment they work in. Time management can become problematic. So use written or symbolic reminders. Again, the priority system, but there can be different smart tools to use, like Reminder Rosie, or setting alarms on the phone, or Alexa, or all those kind of things can be used. So to think about what can support time management, remembering when this meeting is, etc. Arrange materials in order of use. So when they start working in the day, that there's this order to the materials one at a time, so they can understand priority and work on those things, not get distracted. Use a task list with numbers or symbols for importance or deadlines to keep track of, and that should be in a book that they can refer back to prior days. And then ask for additional training or retraining as needed. And again, it might need to be translated in terms of written word with symbols and those visual cues. People can really work better, longer, with more confidence if there's these external supports in place. There needs to be conversation with supervisor and human resources at time, and the time is different for every kind of a job. But when we begin to see implication or stress rise, those conversations should happen. The goal, of course, is to retain as many of the job tasks as possible that you're familiar with and that proficient in. We don't want the person to have to switch the entire job if their job responsibilities can be comported in a way that makes sense. Remove marginal jobs to allow more focus on essential functions. And again, some of these would be considered reasonable accommodations that are protected under Americans with Disabilities Act. Sometimes if you're giving up some tasks, you're willing to take on tasks that you can be proficient in, the person can be proficient in. You might want to consider your loved one to consider a reduction in work hours. It doesn't have to be working or not working. You may notice that the person does well for working on something 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, but 8 hours a day, and they're making mistakes by the end of the day. It takes such mental energy. So you may encourage them to try to reduce their hours. And if they do that, it shouldn't be the 4 days instead of 5 days. It should be the number of hours, because it is about the mental energy taken. Alter when or how the job is performed. So if distractions are the issue, can it be done at home in a quiet space? Or is there another, space that they could work in? Or could it be done, could they come in earlier and leave earlier so that they have, they're working at a time that fits their best mental functioning? And then consider a reassignment to a position that better matches current areas of responsibility or capacity. For example, I worked with a woman who was a grade school teacher, and she was just so stressed every day. She just could not keep up with the work. She couldn't. Classroom management suffered. She knew the material. She was great at interacting with the kids, but the multitasking that is part of being a classroom teacher was just too much. So she left the classroom. She began tutoring students individually. She was great at it, and it gave her that affirmation of supporting students, but was doing it in a way that really maximized her continuing strengths rather than taxing those things that were becoming more challenging. Enough about the person with the disease. Let's talk about you. So as care partners, stress goes up, and certainly for those of you whose loved one is more progressed, those challenges of maintaining your role as care partner and working can become tough. So these are just some statistics. The majority of caregivers work full or part-time. And 87% of those caregivers are helping relatives, so it isn't something they can just step out of. Half are primary caregivers, meaning you're carrying the lion's share of the load, and 23% indicate that they have to provide caregiving duties at least 40 hours per week. So in other words, they're double a job. Now, again, we think about what is the role of the job for caregiver. And so sometimes it's about just financial need. I have to work, or I anticipate I'm going to need some more resources to manage this. But I don't minimize the other two really important purposes for remaining in the workplace. And one of those is respite of the mind. That sometimes going into work and getting your mind distracted on work is the only time you really have some remission from thinking about the dementia and the worries. And that can be important. And that you have a supportive work environment. It's your social outlet. It is the time you get to connect with other people. That's important too. And again, all those accommodations we talked about for the person living with the disease, some of those apply to you too, in terms of, can you shrink your hours some, but that it's still there? Can you change your hours some? But it isn't just about, okay, I can financially do it and the person needs me, but there's a true loss for you. So it's really thinking through what are those what's those key areas? What's the importance for you? And can we make it work some way? I have known, let me say this, I have known of people who the amount of their salary was almost as much as the amount they had to pay a respite care provider to come in and watch their loved one living with the disease. And they still chose to do it because of these other factors. It was a social outlet, it was respite, they loved it, it was part of their identity. And for them, it was worth giving up a significant portion of their salary to pay for someone to come in. And it also gave that person living with the disease a reason to have someone come in. They understood their care partner was working, and so it was justified in their mind. So workplace considerations, there are employee assistance programs with counseling. Don't be slow in using that if that's useful to you. Many workplaces have legal assistance programs to make things like durable power of attorney or living will. Use it. Talk to people about flexible hours. Maybe the hours in the day is reduced, but you come in on Saturday morning to make up that time. We talked about reducing time, changing to part-time. And then, as I talked about earlier, do not take on extra work. This is a time to focus on essential functions. And maybe there's an opportunity to change positions to one that's less responsibility, that fits for you. That's, again, up to the constellation of how work is and value to you. And then to understand there is the Family and Medical Leave Act that can support you in 12 weeks of unpaid leave per year. And, so taking FMLA periodically, I mean, certainly not every year, but taking it sometimes is what you need to rejuvenate, to catch up perhaps on estate planning or managing transition into long-term care, or all of those things. Don't forget that's there, and that may be helpful and allow you to retain your job. When is it time to retire? When the stress outweighs the benefits. That's simply it. That's true of the person living with the disease, and it is true for you. That when that stress is so high, and if there's a way to do it financially, you need to do it. But there's always this consideration of what comes next. That's true for the person living with the disease, and it's most certainly true for you. If you retire to maximize your ability to be a care partner, you still need the breaks. You still need respite. You still need time that's affirming for you. You still need to retain some piece of your identity. So these transitions are not just about making decisions about the workplace. It is about really thinking through life now and what's going to make life meaningful going forward. As always, if you have questions or want to discuss further anything that is shared in the Mindful Minutes, know we're here, and we're more than happy to have these conversations with you. I wish you peace and hope that you have a good rest of the week. Thanks for participating with us today.